Next on the talk is discussion of objective carcass management.
Thank you.
And we're going to hear from Mr. Richard Adams. Thank you, Luke. Afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to have bumped back a bit. I didn't want to be the last fellow standing between you and lunch. As we were running a bit late, so thank you to the organisers for doing that for me. So as you can read there, Richard Adams, I work for Livestock Australia, and I currently manage what we call the objective measurement program. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of what that looks like. There's lots of technical detail around lots of bits of gear that I'm not going to delve into for time, but of course we're happy to spend as much time with anybody later on to explore anything they want to explore further. Okay, so in this space we're trying to work right across the value chain, right from see where the interest in this convention lies at the breeding end, around breeding values and genomics, through live animal measurements, carcass measurements, working in evaluating retail cuts, and then moving out in terms of management systems right through to the cut rate predictions and processing optimization models. In simple terms, trying to put the carcasses you have in the chiller into the most profitable cutting plans for the best client, and that there's significant profit potential in that, but it is quite difficult to do. So I'll take you back to a really simple concept, and Jasmine touched on where the cash comes from. We should never forget where the cash comes from. It all comes from consumers, and everybody else down the value chain shares that in some fashion. The true value of a carcass, let's take that concept, and you can break this into quite a bit more detail. But it really is as simple as that. It's the weight of retail cuts we've got to serve kilograms by the value of those cuts. And that's largely influenced by the eating quality of those cuts, and hence how much money we can coerce, encourage our consumers to spend to buy those cuts. Weight by dollars, simple as that. This is a real example of variation. This is from a processor who can remain anonymous. These are 6 groups of steers, vendor mobs that have come in, and you can see the relative underpay and overpay of those 6 mobs, and the variation within them. So you're looking at $300 to $600 variation in the value of those carcasses coming from the same vendor in the same kill group. Massive variation, and very much supports the variation that Jasmine raised earlier from the feedlot trial here. So you can see if you're vendor number 2, 4, or 5, you're actually being underpaid for the value of those carcasses that the processor got. Conversely, if you're vendor 1, 2, or 6, you're being overpaid for the value of the carcasses you submitted or delivered rather. And I'm sure you all know this. I mean, we haven't had the industry works on averaging, but real life examples of that variation. I guess it's how we understand what that variation is, how we better manage it, and how we move those ones that are below the red line, above the red line, and across the board increase the value of the carcasses, which puts more value in the value chain. And that's a collaborative effort. It's not just for the genetic sector, it's not just for the commercial production and finishing sector, it's not just for the processing sector. We really do, as an industry, have to increasingly think of our role in that value chain and that across-chain collaboration. Very important. In Australia, we export about 70% of our beef, so we are very reliant on export markets. I know you all know that. And we are very reliant, I believe, on being in the high quality of that market. We do not compete on a cost of production basis with many of our international competitors. That doesn't mean we're not competitive in terms of producers or processors in Australia. It's simply the cost structure in our economy, particularly labour, energy, and various other things. So eating quality is very important. The good thing for us, when we look at the Meat Standards Australia model, we've got the Polish, French, Republic of South Africa, US, Japanese, Irish, and of course Australian consumers. I mean, I'll tell you the same thing about what they think the relative value of eating quality is. So very important that as an industry, we have a strong focus on that. And the one that jumps out at the top, and we go have a agreement up there, are the Japanese. And that might not surprise us, given we know the now, in my terms at least, ridiculous amounts of money they pay for some of the very high quality places where we beef in Japan. So they're used to paying a lot of money for quality compared to other markets. Is my interpretation of that. So really important that we keep that in focus as our consumer at the end. Okay, there's a whole bunch of technology that we're working on. I'm not going to delve into lots of these in any great detail whatsoever, but I just want to give you a snapshot of the range of things. So in the heating quality area, we've got a whole bunch of, I'll just call them cameras to simplify the terminology, that are imaging the grading surface. Near infrared, Raman, intramuscular probes, and needle probes we poke into the carcass, into an uncut carcass. I'll show you some pictures of these things so you get the concept of what they are. More novel things, such as nuclear magnetic resonance. And over here on the other side, in terms of my two simple things about carcass value, heating quality and yield, a lot of things around X-rays and various surface imaging, the application of microwave, and again, other surface imaging technology there. So I'll show you a couple of those so you get a sense of what this stuff actually looks like. In terms of ribeye grading cameras, they're all doing essentially the same thing, albeit they're all doing it differently to some degree. They're taking a picture of that of the grading site. They're then breaking that picture down into different tissue types and sequentially doing that to output current grading traits by muscle area, meat colour, fat colour, marble score, so forth is the goal of that. So moving from that trained grader that does that grading day in, day out in the chiller to having an operator who's taking a picture of the machine and the machine's outputting those results for us real time. So there, as I mentioned, there's 8 of those, I think, from the top of my head that we're working with at the moment, different companies or variations. And again, this is not the lot. I just want to show you a couple of examples of different sort of formats of equipment. We've got some that are based like this is a Samsung off-the-shelf Samsung mobile phone in a custom-made shroud. That's a picture of that grading cup. Company called Masterbeef. Medium Image Japan. More of a specialised unit, but they also have a mobile phone-based system as well. And if you want to delve into that more detail, Matt, where are you? Oh, lost him. Matt Madonna. Oh, there he is. Sorry, at the back. You don't know Matt. You can see how the Regular Association, where you're leading the development of this particular technology. E+B, well-established German company. Teams here in Wagga actually played a leading role on bringing this machine in and taking it through calibration processes. A Danish company, big player in the northern meat industry, a company called Frontmatic, customised device, a bit bigger than an iPad or a tablet. And another Australian company here, owned by Morel, big EU company, and another grade. So they're all essentially doing the same thing, but they're different types of machines that fit in different use situations differently. So things that are really different. The intramuscular probes, we call them generally. 2 of those are in play, the MEQ, or medium quality, as the company name is, and another one not as well developed, but called mini probes. In essence, they're doing the same thing. They're a specialised needle with a hollow core, fibre optics, and a light beam imaging system that captures that. So you punch those needles into the eye muscle, you pull the trigger, and as you draw it out, it captures the data and gives you an output of marble score or intramuscular fat. This machine has got accreditation for both lamb and intramuscular fat and beef marble score hot. So this machine is being used by some plants now to get a marble score on a hot carcass before it goes into the chiller. So really starting to change the way businesses can operate and potentially do their grading and chiller management and carcass allocations to the customers. This machine is essentially the same, but the smarts within the needle, I'll call them, for one of the more technical terms, is completely different, but the output is the same, just by 2 different technologies. Some other things we've been working on over the last couple of years is microwave, and this is it's a sort of a pre-production prototype. You can see there in the pictures, both on live cattle, measuring fat depth, and on carcasses. These pictures here are actually from a feedlot a bit further west of here, where the fellow has it's not a typical feedlot. Some of his output are actually cold housing finishes, very focused on not over-fattening because you lose money, too much feed into it. So he's looking for technology. He's using this and trialling it with us as we speak. Another more novel technology, nuclear magnetic resonance. Sounds flash, except basically inside that plastic box you can see there are a bunch of quite powerful magnets. There's no radiation, there's no ionizing radiation, there's no human danger. And in essence, it projects that magnetic field into the loin muscle and measures, in this case, intramuscular fat in lamb oil. You can see there. And I appreciate your beef producers, but bear with me. They've now taken that through to an automated prototype where this arm here pushes the whole lamb carcass into that sensor and measures each month with that in that hot carcass. We're just in the process now of starting to contract up a project to install this prototype machine online in a lamb processing plant. Hopefully we'll start that within the next couple of months. At the same time, they've been working on a beef primal measurement using the same magnetic technology, and that's given some really good results. And for those of you who like scatter plots and graph, the vertical axis is the laboratory IMF measurement, and the horizontal axis is the NMR sensor measurement of IMF vision. So you're pretty much a straight line. So it's done a very good job. That's given them the confidence that they are actually now starting to design an automated system for beef. And we have a processor who's interested in hosting that installation. Hopefully we'll get that underway towards the end of this year. The other part, and we just literally working on this yesterday with a potential host, is developing a live animal application of this. So again, there will be live animal measurement muscle fat. Just some examples of some other sorts of technologies, and I'm not going to get bogged down in the details with you. Raman, some work looking at spectral signals from fat in terms of verifying grass-fed beef brands, for instance. So the type of fatty acids you have in the grass-fed finished animal versus the grain-finished animal are distinctly different. So training this machine as a quality verification for grass-fed brands, and truthfully there's been quite some growth in grass-fed brands over recent years. All our major processors and retailers have grass-fed product lines. Near infrared. This little device is actually it's a near infrared machine. It's commercially available. It's accredited by Osmeat to measure intramuscular fat in lamb as we speak, and there are processors out there now starting to use that to benchmark what's coming through their plants. Haven't developed anything on beef, but it's something that technically is in the future. Yield estimates. This is a European system. There's 4 towers there. Each of those towers has 4 cameras. So as the side of beef moves through at chain speed, takes 40 pictures and stitches them together to estimate carcass yield, primal yield, and cut weights. We're in negotiations with the company that makes this and an Australian abattoir to hopefully commence installation of one of these for research later this year to bring that yield side of the story in the carcass stadium. And I'll come back to that in a moment. We've done quite a lot of work with aviation CT. The reason we're interested in aviation CT is because of its industrial readiness. We use medical CTs routinely to image carcasses, beef and lamb, because it's the most accurate carcass composition tool we've got. But we can't run medical CTs real time in commercial environment. They just don't work that way. So we're working with a couple of international airline CT type companies to do this. And one that's particularly of interest here, I think, for this group in the Livestock side of things, we're working with a company on a new ultrasound application. So the technology itself is ultrasound, which is, I'm sure you're all familiar with, for scanning bulls for unnecessary affected IMF, etc. This is looking at a new way to use, I guess, some existing technology, but how they capture the images and how they analyse those images. So time will tell, if so, how much better it is than what we've got now. But we're starting again some couple of projects hosted by feedlots at the moment to install these and start to develop this for live animal ultrasound. So I hope that it won't be me probably, but in a few years' time, someone else from MLA might be standing in here and telling me that's now commercial success and it's out there and being used in the bull breeding industry as the next generation of ultrasound. Just coming back to yield or carcass composition. I'm sure that over the years, many of you, if not all, have heard about DEXA, dual energy X-ray, well developed in sheep now, and we've got 40 to 50% of lambs currently in Australia. We're getting close to that going through DEXA processes using DEXA right now. So it's made very good gains in sheep. We still haven't finished the calibration work on this in beef, but we've at this stage predicting we'll finish that by by 3 parts of the way through the year there. And again, a bit of a shout out for our processing collaborators. It's something that I do want to give you the message is that the processing industry in Australia are actually very good collaborators when it comes to this sort of research, which we couldn't do without them. In this case, Jasmine's company teas. This machine's installed in their plant in Rockhampton, and we're hoping to do the final beef DEXA calibrations. But again, for those of you who like scatterplots and lines, you can see it's actually doing initial predictions, doing a very good job of predicting the fat and the lean content of beef carcasses. And just in terms of commercial applicability, we've already tested these things in both geese and sheep. Scanning orientation matters, but we can manage it. Pro-chill, doesn't matter whether the process is pro-chills or not, and it doesn't matter of time, whether you use a hot or cold. And there's an example of the same set of carcasses scanned over 3 days. There's a slight offset you can see. Each colour represents the day across those 30-odd carcasses. And as noted here, we've now got a system where each of those images will actually have what we call phantom. The image will contain an X-ray image of a known density and shape plastic, essentially a plastic phantom with different density plastics, and that's used as a reference point that we can correct back to a constant at all times. So if there's any drift in the calibration, so we're quite confident of that across time, hot and cold. Leading into that carcass value side of things, we're putting quite a lot of work in developing carcass calculators that allow us to take carcass data and predict primal right through to customised cutting plan descriptions of what the likely output and value of output is for that. And this takes in all the costs of boning room, extra boning room costs as you fabricate further, and those types of things are totally customisable to the end user. Not something that farmers going to use, but something in the processing and wholesale sector. I'm starting to work with a number of companies on this. And again, when we finish that work up with Tees and Rocky later this year, we'll have a new iteration of this that will be boning quite a few carcasses through the retail cuts in that division research. And just to give you a sense, a couple of cuts that are quite different there. So we've got a short line cap on. It's a noisy cut in the sense it's got bone and fat and what have you around it. It still predicts it very well. Over here, we've got a round, which is a really nice neat muscle. You can trim it, and it's very, very clean, no bone, no fat, and similar sorts of prediction accuracy. So we're really quite pleased with the quality of the estimates of this. Accepting with beef again, this is in terms of the journey. We've now got one of Australia's, you can guess there's only 3 of them really, but one of our 3 biggest supermarkets is now building the land version of this into their internal management systems, try and drive their land procurement to get better control of the carcasses they get to meet the cuts and the trade requirements they have. So quite a lot of sophistication progressing there, led by lamb at the moment, but beef is on the journey. So I guess ultimately trying to bring it together, feedback's come up, Jasmine's talked about it. How do your cattle perform? How do your seed stock producer, how do your clients cattle perform if you're not finishing too many yourself, depending on the business structure? This is certainly not the only systems out there. This is the NIA's Livestock Data Link. There are a number of course, processes that have their own proprietary systems. But it's really a case of accessing that data and really understanding what your livestock are doing. And if you don't know this, then to some degree you're flying blind. And in the LDL system, it's also then linked to some fairly simple but follow-up information you can chase through as to what you might change to increase your compliance. In terms of proprietary systems, I should have given a heads up, but I've got this. This is a feedback sheet from a commercial producer in North Queensland. If you look at the numbers and want to compare it to your own, don't be too closely looking. It's not the message I want to give you. This is obviously come from Tees. Guy in North Queensland sent this to me a little while back. Over here on this side, you'll see we've got the MSA index. We've got lean meat yield. This is a proxy for the DEXA using a carcass weight and fat and eye muscle area algorithm, and a value-based marketing group. And I'll just pop that out so you can see that in a bit more detail. So this is a process of starting to try and move their feedback system into a new era of describing that carcass value around the egg quality, the yield, and where that animal or that solid fits into that sort of value matrix. And a simple depiction of that with the MSA index on the bottom and the lean meat yield on the top. And so to just call out these, you might think the MSA index are a bit low. These are Northern Australian and Pastoral Company steers. They're not quite what you're used to looking at their own fill sheets from, I'm assuming you're mostly southern producers here. But a great effort to see a process to start to try and move into that next level of detail. So bring it to a close. Just a couple of points I want to leave with you. So we're doing a lot of work on new ways to measure things objectively, primarily the carcass at the moment, but working hard to develop more things in the live animal. So just how are you going to respond to this information? You've got feedback now, how well will you use it? How well will you use new feedback or more accurate feedback on things you might already be getting? There's some really good developments in genetic and genomic tools, and you'll hear lots about that over the next 2 days. I was shooting from a quick glance at the agenda. Those tools will help us in terms of our carcass value. Certainly comments before about different things you might want to be focusing on from your on-farm production efficiency, internal efficiency, and so forth. Lean net yield meeting point is 2 basic things. Remember, they are antagonistic. They're negatively related. So you need to work on them in balance to bring them both along at the same time. Unbalanced selection will drive one down and one up in simple terms. Got to develop management systems to capture the value. There's no use breeding high performance animals if you don't manage them, feed them, manage your animal health, what have you really well. It defeats the purpose. Really start working on, if you're not already, how you use that feedback to improve your performance. And I'm going to leave you with my closing comment there is develop your processor relationships. I know lots of producers like the hate processors, as the company excluded, of course, but lots of producers like the hate processors, we all know that. It's a really old-fashioned attitude, in my opinion. Your collaborators in the value chain can be really valuable partners to you in terms of getting better feedback, market access type things, what have you. So I'll wrap up with that final reiterate that. I encourage you all to have really good relationships with processors because you are partners in this value chain. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Mr. Max? So there's some really good recommendations there at the end of the talk. Any feedback from the crowd or questions?
Just regarding the northern cattle, with the NSA grading and the classification scores, so then sort of isolated or put aside.
They're not isolated or put aside, but in terms of northern production systems, they're two of the things that generally contribute to a lower MSA score. You've got cattle that are older for their weight, which shows up in ossification. I hope you're all familiar with ossification, that calcification of the vertical processes in the spine when the carcass is split. It's an indication of physiological age as opposed to chronological age. How physiologically you older, and older, slower growing cattle are going to have higher ossification scores. That's a negative in the MSA model, and they will have higher hump heights. And again, for those not familiar, hump height is a proxy for Bos indicus content. The original MSA models used to have Bos indicus percentage. It was found that was actually quite a very difficult thing to use practically because there's lots of crossbred cattle that get traded, and people who are the vendors that bring them into processing didn't actually know what their content was really. So it was found that hump height actually does a very good job on that. So there are two key things that would be lower in those MSA scores, yes.
Yeah. With the, have you seen any comparison between zero effect on hump as distinct from loss score?
Not
some of the European breeds, high yielding cattle tend to have a little bit more cresting in the neck, rather than they're not the entire, of course. So they're showing a little bit more hump, but they're actually not a positive index.
No, so in that sense, yes, a little bit more hump would again have a more of a negative impact on the MSA index, because as the hump height goes up, it's a negative in the model. In that context, there's no differentiation in the model now of European versus British Taurus. But in the context you said there, those cattle are probably going to be high yielding. We know that in general terms, high yielding cattle tend to be a little bit less on eating quality as well. That's the rule of thumb. So it makes sense in the practical meat science sense, and that's it, without delving down to the actual data.
So you just change the market direction with that sort of product going out from the northern world.
There's still cattle in the north that grade into quality brands. I'm sure later Jasmine might, if you want to explore that with what they do with brands out of their northern plants at Billwheeler and Rockhampton. But you tend to see the northern cattle in lesser quality brands than southern cattle as a rule of thumb. particularly if they're grass finished, because they'll be older, lighter, higher os and so forth. So that's a very general statement.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
The adoption of these technologies by the process. Particularly quickly, I remember hearing back my last man about 55 years ago, it's going to revolutionise the industry. It's kind of one of the government rules,
So there was a version of that high scan camera that I had a picture of there that was around probably 20 years ago, and it never went anywhere. And I don't know, I wasn't working in this space at the time as to what happened, but it was trialled by Woolworths, grading beef carcasses for some period of time, but it never went ahead. But every single one of those devices currently has a processor trialling. So every one of them, and I is supporting the trial industry. So I think that the interest and has changed very quickly in the last couple of years, Andrew. I say every single one of those machines has somebody initially trialing it as we sit here today. And they're all at various stages with different traits and great ranges of accreditation with ultimate. So a lot of work in this space in the last, a lot of progress in this space in the last 12 months.
Any other questions?
Just one for me anyway, Richard, just around repeatability and variation between subjective and objective grading.
Very clear message there, Graham. The other things that these grading devices do is they are very repeatable, highly repeatable.
Okay.
And part of their accreditation process is using multiple devices to image the same carcass multiple times and prove that. So I'm not making that up. We have very good data. The repeatability of these machines, I'm very confident, will be much better than the repeatability of individual units, let alone across units.
Yep.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.